Welcome to an introduction to sensory modulation. My name is Rachel Gaunt and I'm an occupational therapist. When we look at sensory modulation, we're looking at three areas: that of sensory seeking, that of sensory over-responsivity, and that of sensory under-responsivity. For the purpose of this video, we're going to look at the behaviours that we may see from these three areas, as opposed to the inside kind of theory and what's going on in the central nervous system. We're going to focus what you see in the classroom. So let's take sensory under-responsivity first. What are some of the sensory behaviours to look out for? So when you're in the class, do your students seem quiet and passive, or disregard or not respond to stimuli? Do they seem withdrawn or difficult to engage, or self-absorbed because they're not responding or detecting sensory stimuli in their environment? Do they display poor body awareness, seem clumsy, or have movements that are not graded properly? Are they unable to perceive objects that are too hot or too cold? And maybe do they not notice pain in the same way and or respond in the same way to bumps and falls, cuts or scrapes? So if the answer is yes to a number of these, then your student's central nervous system may be responding too slowly, so that is, it's under-responsive to sensory information. If we look at the other side, sensory over-responsivity, what are some of the sensory behaviours to look out for there? Well, does your student seem upset by messy play activities? Do they seem to avoid or seem upset by others or certain clothing fabrics? Do they have a refusal to try new foods or show distress towards some foods? Do they demonstrate fear to go on moving or high equipment such as swings? Do they dislike their head when it's not in upright, such as head inversions? Do they squint their eyes more frequently than their peers? Do they appear upset at loud or unexpected sounds and may cover their ears? Or do they seem distracted by environmental sounds such as projector or distant bell? If the answer is yes, your student's central nervous system may be responding too quickly, so over-responsive to sensory information in everyday life. Now you may see them avoid, shut down or become aggressive. We can also take a look at the last area, which is sensory seeking. So what are some of the sensory behaviours to look out for here? Well, does your student look at moving objects out of the corner of their eye? Do they want to watch or make objects spin more frequently than their peers? Do they twirl or spin themselves repeatedly? Do they focus on playground time, such as a swing, and movement opportunities over other equipment or people? Do they want to move about the room rather than staying seated? Do they want to jump and crash all the time, or pull and push and lift items? Do they chew or mouth objects frequently? And do they make noise when the class is quiet? If the answer is yes to a number of these areas, your student's central nervous system may not be responding effectively, may be under-responsive to sensory information in everyday life, and they are proactively seeking out extra input themselves. The challenge is when they're seeking out this extra input, it may not always be conducive to your classroom environment or for their own learning, or being able to get the intensity that their body needs. So these are the three areas: sensory seeking, sensory under-responsive, and sensory over-responsive. So something to bear in mind is we may see areas out of all three in your students, but there may be one that is more prevalent than others. If you'd like more information, I would encourage you to speak to your occupational therapist for your students' needs, and you may also want to refer to the sensory processing measure as a reference for this information. And there's a sensory processing measure classroom form. Many of you may be familiar with that already. So thanks for listening.